component is turning one way and producing movement in another. So in a sense, this gear train is heterokinetic because it's going one direction, but the cog it's into working with goes in the opposite direction. And the tibia and the talus work like that. What are the models that we bring? Oh, it's a box, yeah, one thing, that's my right, yeah. Oh, that's the one from the clinic, right. Yeah. So, what we've got here is a model of the foot, obviously, tibia fibula. The opaque bone is the talus. This thing's all falling apart, really falling apart now. That should be going through there. It's old and dying. Put ligaments back where there wasn't and everything. But basically, what this model does, it takes the foot into inversion and eversion and shows how the talus has to revolve around the subtalar joint and the calcaneum to produce a heterokinetic motion. So when we're walking, the pulse return from the foot is going back to the central mass of the body. So when we stand on the floor, we're actually sending a signal to the central mass of the body. Now that happens with all tensegral units. So it doesn't matter, this is the shape of the pelvis with two legs. This could be in anything. So this anything is flying along. See how far it would fly. So it's flying along and it lands. The second it lands, that's a connection with what we call the interface. Up until then, it hasn't got one. So when it's in mid-air, all parts are pulling equally, compressed, made under tension and held under tension, movable in any direction. And its other quality is, if you move any one part of it, the whole of it interacts. The same as the spine. If you squeeze one part of that, it's losing its elasticity now. But as you pull that, the top would actually nip your fingers in here. The top vertebra would move. So that's your tensegral unit. The second we interact with the floor or any other surface, it could be a wall or anything, this is important three-dimensionally, then we meet an interface. And when we meet the interface with a tensegral unit, a pulse return signal is sent from that contact with the interface to the central mass, wherever that is. And the central mass really should be over the centre of gravity, and if it is, everything's in balance. So when we're stood on the floor, we're sending a message to the central mass of the body. That's positioned because of our lumbar lordosis over the centre of gravity, everything's fine. Then we've got to start to walk and move from that. So as we move and our foot reaches the floor again, another signal comes up, our iliac bones have rotated and our central mass has shifted, but we don't lose balance because of this pulse return and the constant movement of the central mass over the centre of gravity. That's what keeps us in balance. So those concepts are important. Now, the foot is the first part of a gear train and it's heterokinetic. Certainly this joint here is described by Kapanji in this book. I read his book and then I had to buy this model to understand what he was talking about. As soon as you get the model, you go, oh yeah, got it now, I understand heterokinetics. So if you want to have a look at that model, it's a good one for showing that movement. But further up the body also, this heterokinetic junction continues, but it's not mentioned much. That's the only place that Kapanji mentions in the whole of all of his volumes. But when you start to understand what heterokinetic motion is if my humerus is doing one thing and my radius is doing something else and my finger's doing something else, then that's heterokinetic. Do you get that? And because it's a gear train, it doesn't have to lose any potential either. So if I drive something from my big toe through my big iliac bone that revolves around the sacroiliac joint, that torsions the lumbars, changes them at D12, up to D7, D4, D1, occiput, all working, extends it out to the arm, comes to the finger, they're all tension coupled because they're already tension coupled. We've got ligaments existing all around them. They're already tensegrous, we don't have to worry about that. All we have to worry about is getting that signal through the central mass, centre of gravity over it, in balance, continue up, send it to the finger, and then what do I want to do with the finger? I want to pull this way, so I need flexion. So then I go back to my baby neural reflexes when I was born. So we're all born with the same reflexes, some switch on, some didn't. But if they did switch on, the first thing we would do is our eyes would move, our tongue would move, and we'd see something and we'd go, oh, more than that. And next thing you got the baby shuffling off. But the first movement it makes, as we know, is homolateral, then cross-lateral, then cross-pattern, then paralateral. And when we discussed paralateral movement with Atsumu, we said it must be paralateral sensing. And he said, no, way beyond. I looked at him and I said, beyond paralateral? And he said, of course. And you go, oh, okay. Then you have to find out why. That's how we taught you. You go, yeah, you're right. Find it. So off you go and find it. But when he said that, it's like, so in my mind, it's like, well, what's beyond paralateral? So, still looking. So, once we've got all of those organisations, the baby has a mass neural reflex. So, if the baby looks down, its legs flex. If it looks to the left, its legs move out. If you turn the head, its arm will move, because they're reflex movements. And it has those movements till 3 months, till 6 months, till a year, then it starts to get paralateral, it can walk around. And it's not until it's age 7 that it gets what we call a mature nervous system. A nervous system that's covered with myelin sheaths and is now mature. So it can now make independent movements. Because also at the age of 7, all of our movements that were reflex were left brain. So you've got the left brain looking after all your locomotion movements, all your needs, everything going on there. Your right brain's still developing imaginatively and other things. At the age of 7, movement has to shift from the left brain to the right brain into what we call a gestalt. And the gestalt means that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So the gestalt is all of the body movements, 3-dimensionally and 4th-dimensionally, in any direction, obviously omnidirectional, whereas the left was lots of reflexes, but not choice. So with a mature right brain, you can do that with one hand, that with that, that with that, that with that. When you dip your head, these flexors don't have to switch on. They can work independently. Which looked like freedom, looked like evolvement. But then the Industrial Revolution came along and just put the brakes on that. Because they sat down people in factories and they realised they could make cotton, they could make lace, they could make nuts, they could make cars. In fact, Henry Ford was a butcher. One day he visited a butcher's warehouse and he saw cows coming in at one end, these skilled butchers, and packed sausages and meat and fillet steak at the other end, and he went, if you could do that with cars, you'd make 100 a week. And so we went back and instead of making 1 a week with 10 engineers, he got 100 people who weren't engineers and made 100 a week. Simply because he saw this way of working in that way. Why was I talking about Henry Ford? Oh, so he automated everything. So you got someone, all he does all day is, you know, he puts that on there and drills 2 bolts and your car doors on. The next man puts the window in and drills 2 bolts. And in the old days he would have done this, or he'd have done that, or he'd have typed something. And all of these skills that we had from neural mass and evolved into natural movements were gone, because you were working one-sided all day repetitively and either sitting or standing. And so our ancient reflexes just disappeared. And I've got a book at home by a man called something Bell. Rings a bell. That was his name. And he wrote about the hand. And he said the hand was a very, very complex unit. And he wrote this whole volume on how the hand evolved and evolved the brain from it. But when industrial tribunals came up, or skill sets came up, and they had to teach an apprentice how to hold a hammer. So if you look at a skilled, a cobbler nowadays would do it, a few other people would do it. I remember my first ever job in the steelworks, a friend of mine worked on at the end of the plate mill, and these plates would come up the oven, get rolled into the thickness they needed, and they had metal clogs on, and they used to stand on these metal clogs with these little, so this is going to cargo fleet to make a ship, so they had to put the numbers on the hot metal with these hammers. It was terrible. And he'd go, you could hear them, and I always wanted to be one of them just for that. He used to do that with a hammer, bang, bang. And coppers were the same. It's like, oh, that's clever. And off they went. And in the war, when people wanted cushy jobs, the cushiest job was a cobbler. So you'd all get recruited and they'd go, any cobblers in the crowd? 10 hands would go, oh, we're all cobblers. Yeah, okay, come over. So the accomplished cobbler would go, put a nail in that shoe for me. Next. Tacks her on his mouth. You're a cobbler, off. So that was the skill. So when they started to teach people an apprentice, they had to have things that if you injured yourself, you could sue them. So a lot of the neuroscience of how our hands work was ditched over there. It's still there, but nobody wants to measure it because it's almost immeasurable on the scale that they wanted to use. So the teacher would get hold of a handle like that on a hammer. There's the hammer shaft. And he would hold the nail like that at a certain angle. And this all has to be written down for safety and security reasons. And so you end up teaching someone how to use a muscle to bang a nail into a piece of wood. And any skilled man will tell you that's not how you do it. You know, if you've got a hammer or any weapon, it becomes an extension of your body, and we use our natural skills again. So I see lots of places where they're just gone. And we're fortunate because we've got the only job on the planet where we get to go from toe to head, front to back, side to side, and it's all manual. And we get to feel tissue, whether it drags, whether it moves, whether it stretches, whether it goes with us, doesn't go with us, it's resistant, it's non-compliant. To me, that's a fight. All it is it's tied to some value. Because I don't get around much now. I go, right, jump on the couch, you're my next opponent. Oh, take this like there, and then.
Yes.
And it just go there, look now. Bit of hypnosis in there as well. And so this is one of the places that still exists. And so when I look at that Somi's art being perpetuated, for the last 30 years, it really wasn't. We did our best, all of us. But it wasn't really what he was doing. That was the big thing. Because he would take a non-compliant arm, so that's an arm that won't bend, and he would bend it on the opponent. But he wouldn't only bend that one, he'd bend all the others. So they ended up like this, and they ended up on the floor in pain. But what he was doing was tension coupling you, and gear training you into collapse. So once you know the body folds, it's very easy to get hold of someone's digit, make the elbow do that, the head do that, that do that, and then you're engaging with their mass neural reflexes as well. So you're taking them into flexion, so they can't get out of extension. And then you take them into a side bend, which produces a rotary torque in the spine, and then the knee collapses, and down we go on your foot, like a little tin box, and you're away. And when we went with what we went with, he said, because of what you already know, I can show you this feeling. And it'll take a long time to get it, but you'll get this feeling. And so we came back with a model that we already had. We had a 4-year course at the time. And the model we came back with was position and release, which you all know. I'm telling some of your history, but for some it's new and needed. So position and release means that if you sprain a joint, that joint will go out of its normal alignment, it's off the static position, and it'll go to a new neutral and be held there by ligaments. But it's now not in neutral, and so the signals that it sends to the central mass over the centre of gravity are incorrect. The brain is very, very sensitive to that, so it's get messages from the feet, sacroiliac, the occipital joint, and the ears, the labyrinthal system, and the eyes. And anything that's out, it will make an adjustment to. And it's good at making adjustments, so I can put that shoulder a bit, but I've got to use the latissimus dorsi now. I've got to tighten the pec minor. I've got to counterbalance that with the lower trapezius. I've got to put more weight on that hip. But it'll be okay. And then I'm walking with that for a while, but that's an adaptation. So eventually that's going to get worse. So once that joint's out of position, the ligaments hold it there and the body goes into adaptation. We come along and we go, okay, I can take it further into its lesion, but I can't bring it out because it's resistant with fascia and ligamentous spasm to protect it. And so that was the way, because I'd done Sutherland's positional release course and other people's positional release courses, and so that's what we did for many, many years, and that was the base of the course. That was the Amma. That's why it's so different now, because it's the opposite of that, the exact opposite. So you learn all that and you go, forget that. And it's much easier sometimes to learn something for the first time and forget it and disassemble it, reassemble it the right way around. But that's also possible without confusion. So about when we locked down, and I made loads of notes. I made these notes, and Christopher got me these little books, Nature's Plan for Movement. And I wrote these little books in my little room with the sun shining. And I got this one out last night, because I was looking for some particular quote. And in the back, it told me, and one of them did, must be the other, but it was 218 when I wrote it, which was 5 years ago, and I've got 3 of them in there. And this is what I wrote then, that I was going to do these classes and then COVID come. This is not a Budo class. I didn't want to teach Budo because people want to learn Budo can, and I'm crap at it. I don't know the names of the techniques, and I can't do it. We're playing with Budo concepts and discovering the origins of movement. And somebody told me you must find it in nature. So off I went. So when we were doing that process, I damaged my toes to the point where I couldn't walk at all. And I was still training Chris and James in the garden. Every Wednesday we train. And I'd say, right, you grab or you punch and out, right, you do this, you do that, you do that, you do this, you do that. And I wouldn't move up my 2 feet. And I said, what should we be doing with our feet? Oh, well, if I could move, you would be going into this command. But I can't show you it, so you'll just have to do that command. But they knew the commands anyway. I would do this from here, that from there, but I couldn't move. So what it made me understand is, the only movement I could get was from spinal dynamics. But it actually got stronger and more powerful the less I moved. Until the point where I didn't move at all. I never moved off the spot. And it didn't matter, because I had enough sway, enough touch, enough this. And this developed, and I still wasn't treating people. And then we came back after COVID, and I tried to walk around the couch, and I just couldn't. I couldn't muster half an hour's walking around the couch. So I went, that's it, can't do that. Forgot my seat. Oh, bring it tomorrow. But then I started to understand these concepts and apply them differently, to the point where I can now do them sitting and more dynamically and more powerful than I ever could when I was stood. So that's important to me, because I have to use my ischial tuberosities when I'm sat and my toe ends, whereas when you're standing you're going to be able to use leg stances, which I can now show you, which is useful as well. But that brought me closer to what he was actually doing. And then when I found I wanted to work with deep fascia, and I found after COVID lots of people had pericardial problems here, that just, the rib cage was like a piece of wood. And until you freed that off, the respiratory problems wouldn't get better. And I believe that's basically what long COVID is. It's starving your brain, you're not breathing, and you're going to get more heart attacks. And we developed deeper techniques of moving the fascia and working with the fascia and stripping them out. And then when you look at the energy channels, and you look at the peripheral nerves, you've got peripheral nerves running all the way around the body. And I just see the brain as being a jellyfish. And all the nerves is its tentacles. And so if we were a jellyfish with just tentacles, that would be our nervous system. And at the end of that nervous system gives you a nasty sting. So you know that something comes out of there. So for its locomotion, it just needs to simply shape shift to that shape. So there's the line. So now the apex of the line is beyond the finishing line. Then when it goes back to its normal shape, it keeps doing that. It moves. But it's in a water medium, it doesn't need anything else. So the water pressure is equal and opposite all the way around. Gravity presses down. So when we come out of the water and we wanted a framework, we had to evolve from a jellyfish brain to a structure that would house those nerves, and that became fascia, and as it more densified became cartilage, bone and all the rest of the other things. But all the same tissue, just made of collagen. So we're a collagen entity that's tensile, that could be floating around in water, could be in air, but we move around and locomote very well in the upright position. So that's got us to where we are now. And when I look at Hatsumi's movements, things he said, you've got to be able to use every part of your body. So he would do some with your elbow and he'd, right, that's potent. I thought he used my elbow like that. I was in a karate world where an MP would break a board and he'd go, what about that? You go with a sore elbow and he thought you were tough. Try using the elbow like that in a fight was never going to work. You know, what did Bruce Lee say? Boards don't fight back. Something like that. But he would use it in a unique way. You'd see that he was using his knee over there and his other knee was going over there and his body was doing that to produce that pressure. But he just did it so naturally in his flow and never explained it. And he actually told us, he said, I've never taught the 10th dance this. And we said, well, why? And whatever reason he gave, it's on that interview. He said, I'm showing you it for the first time. Well, right, what are we going to do with this? So this is like the evolvement of it. And where I've got to is, without science, I realise you can't present this to a scientific world. So about several years ago now, we went to Dundee University. We were doing some dissections there, and I was asked to do a talk. It was like, a talk at a university. We even got the cap. So I went off and we did this talk, and it was on vectors. And I've been looking at vectors, and I went, right, this is interesting stuff. This is how this works. So once I understood the vectors like that, I read, right, that's a vector. And we gave this talk, and there was a Russian man there, Leonid Blumfeld. And he's very high up in levers, vectors, working with tissue, and he works closely with Robert Schlepp and Stephen Levin, purporting tensegrity. And I gave me a talk in front of him, it was like, oh, right, no. And he came up at the end, he said, that's a very interesting talk. He said, at last I found someone who understands vectors. He said, you're spot on. I went, thank you very much. He said, I've heard lots of people talk about vectors, he said, but they don't know what they're talking about. That was spot on. So I went, oh, good. I know about vectors now. So then I started to put that into the armamentarium. So when you look at vectoring, Hatsumi's doing a lot of that to bring that focus to a finger, to a point, to make it potent. And you think, well, where's he pressing? It doesn't matter where he's pressing. The interface lets you through. Once the interface lets you through, you talk to a person's nervous system. And that's the importance. He's not breaking bones. He said, Kopo Jutsu, okay? Breaks bones. He said, I'm showing you Capo. Capo Sensei, yeah. Break the spirit. I said, how do you do that? He said, much softer. And you're talking to the nervous system. That's Capo. That's Kopo. Okay, that's bone breaking. He said, that's for the gorillas. And this is for the finesse. Okay? So you've got to look at all these concepts and put them into a mix and go, how do we join this to that, tensegral units to that, tension coupling, heterokinetic, 4-bar gauge mechanism. What's the other word? Long arc, locomotion. That's what we're doing. So we've got as far as this one. This is the get your train. So I'm going to stop there for breath. Any questions so far? Because we need to understand each component. I'm going to build some components through the day.